The halls of Shirith Prime's Intergalactic Academy were buzzing with excitement. This wasn't just any ordinary lesson. The students were about to delve into the mysteries of one of the galaxy's most resilient and unpredictable species, humans, or as they were colloquially known across the galaxy, Deathworlders. The term came from Earth's classification as a deathworld, a planet teeming with dangers, from predators to natural disasters that most species couldn't fathom surviving. Yet humans not only thrived but spread across the stars. To the other species, humans seemed like an anomaly. And for the first time, the Academy had secured a human subject to study. Professor Searle, a seasoned educator and renowned xenobiologist, stood at the front of the classroom, his 6 slender limbs poised as he prepared the students for the session. The professor was from the Krillith species, known for their logical minds and calculating demeanor. His large, dark eyes flickered as the alien students filed into the room, their different shapes and forms settling in at their respective desks. Today's subject was Captain Alex Mason, a human from Earth who had volunteered for the study. The Academy was known for its rigorous examination of the biology and behaviors of alien species, but even they were cautious about studying a Deathworlder up close. There was something both fascinating and unnerving about a species that had adapted to survive the chaos of their homeworld and yet seemed so casual about the inherent dangers of life. Humans had a reputation for being curious, adaptable, and impossibly resilient, which made them a perfect subject of study for these alien scholars. As Captain Alex entered the room, the students' gazes fixated on him with awe and curiosity. He stood out with his relaxed posture, casual demeanor, and a wide smile that revealed nothing of the dangers associated with his species. He was average in stature by human standards, about 6 feet tall, with short brown hair and a muscular frame shaped by years of interstellar military service. To the untrained eye, he seemed harmless, even friendly, but the alien students knew better. This was a creature born from a world of constant peril, and they were about to learn firsthand just how different he was from them. "Thank you for joining us today," Captain Mason. Professor Searle began, his voice smooth and clinical as his long limbs gestured toward the human. "Your contribution to interspecies knowledge is invaluable." "No problem," Alex said with a grin, settling into the chair provided for him. He had an easygoing nature, something that the alien students found particularly unusual given the notorious reputation humans had across the galaxy. The students were an eclectic mix of species. There was Morax, a floating orb of iridescent energy from the planet Glagon V, whose species communicated through pulses of light and had no physical form. Next to him was Leolana, a tall, slender being from the moon of Thraxis with pale blue skin and elongated fingers. Her species, the Thraxians, were known for their intellectual prowess and lack of need for physical rest or sleep. Then there were the Vorians, squat creatures with thick, armored skin, and a few of lions, small creatures that resembled winged mammals. None of them required sleep in the traditional sense. For most of these species, the concept of being unconscious for extended periods was foreign and unnecessary. Their bodies either regenerated energy through meditation-like states or, like the Thraxians, remained constantly awake and alert, only pausing for moments of rest when needed. This made humans, with their need for sleep, a true biological oddity. "We will begin by exploring basic human behaviors and biology," Professor Searle announced, his voice calm and authoritative. "Captain Mason will explain some of the fundamental aspects of his species' routines, including their physical needs, particularly something known as sleep." The class murmured in curiosity. The students had heard about human sleep, but had never fully grasped its importance. To them, sleep was an unnecessary vulnerability. Why would any species choose to spend a third of their lives in a state of unconsciousness? It seemed absurdly dangerous. Captain Alex leaned back in his chair, taking the questions in stride. "Yeah, so sleep is pretty essential for us humans," he explained. "We need it to recharge, reset our brains, repair our bodies. It's how we recover from the day's activities and prepare for the next one." One of the students, a Vorian named Krog, raised a thick, scaly arm. "Recharge?" he asked, his gravelly voice barely masking his skepticism. "You lose power, like a machine." Alex chuckled. "Not exactly. It's more biological than mechanical. Our brains need sleep to process information, clean up all the junk from the day, and our muscles, organs, and pretty much every system in the body take that time to repair themselves." Yelena, the Thraxian student, tilted her head in confusion. "You are vulnerable during this sleep state." "Totally," Alex replied. "Out like a light, as we say. If you wanted to, you could probably sneak up on me and I'd never even know it." A collective gasp rippled through the classroom. Vulnerable. Unconscious for hours at a time. This was beyond their comprehension. To the Thraxians, who were always in a heightened state of awareness, sleep sounded like a death sentence. Morax's lights blinked rapidly, indicating agitation. How can your species survive such vulnerability? Surely you would be prey to countless predators. Well, that's the thing, Alex explained, leaning forward. We evolved in groups. Back in the day, we'd have people keeping watch while the others slept. Safety in numbers, you know. Over time, we figured out how to make safe places to sleep, buildings, caves, you name it. The students remained puzzled. To them, it still seemed like an unnecessary risk. If humans were so advanced, why hadn't they evolved past the need for sleep? It was one of the many mysteries of human biology that alien species struggled to understand. Perhaps a demonstration would be most educational, Professor Searle said, his long fingers tapping against the holographic screen in front of him. Captain Mason, if you would kindly demonstrate this process, we could observe how your body reacts during sleep. Alex raised an eyebrow. You want me to take a nap right now? Precisely, Searle confirmed. The students will observe your physical state while you rest. It will be an invaluable learning opportunity. Alex shrugged. Sure, why not? I've been on the go for a while anyway. Could use a little shut-eye. He settled back into the chair, making himself comfortable. The students watched intently, their eyes wide with curiosity. As Alex closed his eyes, his breathing began to slow, his body relaxing as he drifted off into sleep. At first, the class remained quiet, watching him in silent fascination. It seemed peaceful enough. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, his face relaxed, and his limbs slackened. But as the minutes ticked by, the students started to grow uneasy. Is he still alive? Yelena whispered, her elongated fingers trembling slightly as she stared at Alex's motionless form. Her species never experienced stillness in this way. Even during their brief moments of rest, Thraxians remained mentally alert and physically responsive. The idea of someone being so still, so seemingly lifeless, was unnerving. Professor Searle moved closer, his large eyes narrowing as he scanned Alex's body with a handheld device. His vital signs remained stable. This is normal for humans. But the class was far from reassured. As the minutes passed, the reality of human sleep began to weigh heavily on their minds. Alex's body was completely unresponsive, his consciousness seemingly absent. To the students, it was as if they were watching a living being slowly slip away into some kind of stasis. A small lion, perched on one of the desks, let out a high-pitched squeak. What if he doesn't wake up? The question sent a ripple of fear through the room. While the professor remained calm, the students began to shift in their seats, exchanging worried glances. For them, the idea of sleep was too alien, too dangerous. What if something went wrong? What if the human never woke up? Krog, the Vorian, slammed his fist on the table, causing a metallic clang that echoed through the room. This is madness. No species should leave themselves this vulnerable. It goes against everything we know about survival. Professor Searle's calm demeanor began to falter slightly as the growing panic among the students became palpable. He had known that studying human sleep would be unusual for his class, but he hadn't anticipated just how unsettling it would be for them to witness it in real time. Remain calm, Student Skrull said, though his voice lacked its usual certainty. This is part of their biology. There is no reason to panic. But it was too late. The class was already spiraling into fear. To their minds, sleep was too close to death, and the longer Alex remained unconscious, the more convinced they became that something was terribly wrong. More Axe's light patterns flashed erratically, indicating rising distress. The Celexian, a creature resembling a liquid form in a containment tank, began to ripple in agitation. Yelena stood up from her seat, her long, slender legs carrying her swiftly toward the front of the room. Professor, she said urgently, we must wake him. We don't know what's happening to his body. This could be a crisis. Before Professor Searle could respond, the classroom door slid open, and several medical technicians from the academy rushed in. Having been alerted by the rising alarm levels in the room, the sight of the unresponsive human on the chair only intensified their concern. Prepare the medical equipment, one of the medics said as they hurried toward Alex. We need to ensure his survival. Panic rippled through the students as they watched the scene unfold. What had started as a simple demonstration was rapidly turning into a medical emergency, at least in the minds of the aliens. The sound of clattering instruments echoed through the classroom as the medical team scrambled into action, their alien features drawn tight with urgency. For them, this was no longer a study in human behavior, it had become a crisis. The students, wide-eyed and restless, watched in anxious silence as the Academy's top medical technicians moved swiftly around Captain Alex's sleeping form. To them, this state of unconsciousness was alien, unnatural, and increasingly dangerous. Professor Searle stood at the edge of the commotion, observing the rising chaos. His composed expression belied the concern creeping into his mind. While he was well aware that sleep was a normal part of human biology, witnessing it firsthand had a profoundly different impact on both himself and his students. He could sense their growing dread, and even his own nerves were beginning to fray. The lead medic, a stocky Vorian named Jax, was the first to approach Alex with his scanning device. His gray, armor-plated skin glistened under the overhead lights as his large, clawed fingers delicately ran the scanner over the human's chest. Jax's visor displayed Alex's vital signs in real time: a steady heartbeat, regular breathing, no signs of distress. And yet, to the eyes of the aliens, this state of complete stillness was unnerving. "His vitals are stable," Jax muttered to the team, his voice deep and gravelly, "but I've never seen anything like this. It's as though his entire system has powered down. His brain activity is low, but his organs are functioning. It's almost like stasis." The words hung in the air, amplifying the uncertainty. The medical team exchanged uneasy glances. Stasis was usually reserved for the severely injured or for those undergoing long interstellar journeys. The fact that a human could voluntarily enter a state that seemed so close to stasis was bewildering to them. Ilana, the Thraxian student, stepped forward, her pale blue skin shimmering as she stood rigidly in front of Professor Cyril. Her large, dark eyes were filled with urgency. "Professor," she whispered, "this isn't natural. How can a species that requires such vulnerability survive? Should we not intervene?" Cyril, feeling the weight of the situation, cleared his throat, his thick limbs fidgeting slightly as he responded. "As bizarre as this may seem to us, Ilana, we must remember that sleep is a vital part of human biology. We must trust that Captain Mason's body knows what it is doing." But even Cyril's words lacked the confidence they had carried earlier. As the minutes dragged on, the peaceful image of Alex sleeping seemed less benign. The longer he remained still, the more the students' fears deepened. The sight of him, completely motionless and unaware of the world around him, was something that no species in the room could fully comprehend. Across the room, more axes pulsating light patterns became erratic. The Glygonian communicated entirely through flashes of light, and in this moment, his erratic blinking indicated sheer panic. "This is madness," his lights translated. "No species should leave themselves in such a state. What if predators attacked? What if the environment changed? How can this be a survival mechanism?" Krog, the burly Vorian student, slammed his fist on his desk once more, the sound reverberating throughout the room. "This is a flaw," he growled, his deep voice thick with contempt. "Humans are Deathworlders, yet they willingly let their guard down. It defies logic." Other students began murmuring in agreement, their collective anxiety growing by the second. Their alien minds could not reconcile the idea that such a dangerous species would allow themselves to enter a state of vulnerability for hours at a time. To them, it was an evolutionary oversight, a glaring weakness in the armor of humanity. Ilana's long fingers twitched nervously as she glanced back at the sleeping human. "We must wake him. It's been too long. What if this is the beginning of some kind of medical failure? We don't know enough about his biology to let this continue." Jax, the lead medic, nodded in agreement. "I believe it's time to attempt revival. It's too risky to let him remain in this state without further knowledge." Professor Cyril, now feeling the pressure of the situation spiraling out of control, sighed and nodded. "Very well. Proceed cautiously. Do not cause harm to the subject." Jax motioned for his team to prepare the revival equipment. The medics swiftly set up a series of devices designed to stimulate neural activity and trigger a waking response. The aliens were used to dealing with beings whose biology was vastly different from humans, but even their most advanced medical technology had never been applied to a Deathworlder in such a situation. As the revival machine hummed to life, a small handheld device was placed near Alex's temple. The device emitted a low-frequency pulse, designed to trigger a neurological response that would jolt the subject into consciousness. The room held its collective breath as the medics activated the device. The pulse washed over Alex's still form, but to the horror of the alien onlookers, nothing happened. He remained unmoving, his peaceful sleep undisturbed by the alien technology. "It's not working," one of the medics hissed, her thin, translucent skin vibrating with anxiety. Jax frowned and adjusted the device, increasing the intensity of the pulse. Still, nothing. Captain Alex's body remained still, his breathing slow and steady, as if completely unaffected by the intervention. "He's not responding," Jax said, a note of disbelief creeping into his voice. "How is that possible? This device works on nearly every known species." The panic in the room began to spread. The students whispered among themselves, their fear growing as the revival attempts continued to fail. To them, Alex's stillness was becoming more and more unnatural. What if he was dying? What if this wasn't sleep at all, but some catastrophic biological shutdown? More axes' lights flickered wildly. We are watching him die, his light patterns conveyed. We must stop this. Professor Searle felt a knot tightening in his stomach. He hadn't anticipated this level of panic. Despite his academic knowledge, seeing a human in such a state was disconcerting even to him. He tried to maintain control of the situation. Everyone remain calm, he said, though his voice wavered slightly. We need to trust the process. Human sleep can last for hours, this is normal. But it was no use. The fear in the room was palpable. The alien students, used to their own methods of rest and recovery, simply could not grasp the concept of prolonged unconsciousness. In their minds, Alex was on the brink of death. In the midst of the chaos, Yelana's eyes widened as she spotted something, the faintest twitch of Alex's hand. She gasped and pointed. Look, his hand moved. All eyes turned to Alex for a moment. There was silence. Then, another small movement, his fingers curled slightly, his eyelids fluttered, and his breathing quickened. He's waking up, Jax announced, relief washing over him. The tension in the room began to lift as Alex's body stirred. Slowly, as if coming out of a deep fog, Alex opened his eyes, blinking groggily at the bright lights above him. He stretched his arms over his head, yawning loudly. Man, that was a good nap, Alex mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. He sat up and rubbed his eyes, completely unaware of the panic that had gripped the room just moments before. The students stared at him in stunned silence. How could he be so casual, so relaxed, after being in what they perceived as a near-death state? Alex glanced around, noticing the medics and the worried expressions on the students' faces. He raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. What's going on? Why does everyone look so freaked out? Professor Searle, struggling to regain his composure, stepped forward. Captain Mason, he began. His voice measured. You've been asleep for nearly an hour. The class became concerned. Concerned, Alex repeated, his confusion deepening. I told you guys I was just going to sleep. I didn't think it would cause this much of a fuss. Yelana, still shaken, stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. You were completely unresponsive, Captain. We thought you were dying. Alex's eyes widened in surprise, and then, to the astonishment of the class, he burst out laughing. Dying? No, this is normal for humans. We do this every night. It's just sleep. The room fell into a stunned silence. Sleep? This was normal. Professor Searle blinked in disbelief, his mind struggling to reconcile what he had witnessed. You mean to tell us that this state, this complete vulnerability, is a routine part of your existence? Yep, Alex said, still chuckling as he stood up and stretched. Humans need sleep. It's how we recharge. Nothing dangerous about it, at least. Not if you're in a safe place. The students were dumbfounded. For them, the concept of sleep was still too alien, too strange to fully accept. How could a species that was so dangerous, so adaptive, allow itself to be so vulnerable for hours at a time? Morax, whose lights had finally calmed, expressed the question that was on everyone's mind. How can you trust your environment enough to let yourself become so defenseless? It seems reckless. Alex shrugged. We evolved in groups, safety in numbers, that sort of thing. And as we developed, we built safer places to sleep. It's just part of who we are. As Alex casually explained the mechanics of human sleep, the class began to realize just how different humans were from every other species they had studied. Their ability to survive, even thrive, despite their biological vulnerabilities, was both baffling and impressive. Professor Searle, still processing everything, nodded thoughtfully. It seems that once again, humanity has defied our expectations. What we mistook for a fatal flaw is, in fact, a remarkable adaptation. The students, though still somewhat unsettled, nodded in agreement. What they had witnessed was not a weakness, but a testament to human resilience. The panic in the room slowly dissipated, replaced by a newfound respect for the species they had come to study. As the class ended and the students filed out, still whispering among themselves about the bizarre phenomenon they had witnessed, Alex shook his head with amusement. You guys really need to loosen up, he said with a grin. Sleep's not so bad. And with that, he left the room, leaving behind a group of alien students who had learned far more than they ever expected about the strange and fascinating ways of the Deathworlders.